The Chicago Bears have a first-round pick for the first time in 3 years in a few weeks, and how they approach is going to be something to watch because every front office member in this organization is, whether they acknowledge this or not, they are on the hot seat. As we know, they traded their 2019 and 2020 first-round pick and more for all-world defensive player Khalil Mack, and I do want to revisit that in this video, and we will. But this is going to be a draft guide for the Chicago Bears, as we've done a few videos for teams now and their draft guide and what they should do in the upcoming draft, the priorities they should draft with, and players they could target in the later rounds. The Bears select 20th overall, as they did make a playoff appearance in 2020 and did get to the tournament and were a part of the NFL debut on Nickelodeon and ultimately the Slime Cam. They are definitely going to be looking to build upon a playoff appearance from this past year, and how they attack the draft will largely determine not only their success for 2021 but their future as well. But before we get started, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as each only take a second to do and it would be very much appreciated. Now let's begin. So when discussing the Bears draft, general manager Ryan Pace and head coach Matt Nagy, we have to discuss the two biggest decisions that have come with Pace since he took over as the GM. Ryan has been the GM since the 2015 offseason, and his biggest moves came when selecting franchise quarterback, or as we can view it now as the hopeful franchise quarterback in Mitch Trubisky in 2017, and then a year later prior to week 1, trading a haul for Khalil Mack. Now, had the Trubisky pick worked out, or had he been an average player, then the Bears would consistently be contending for a Super Bowl or at minimum one of the two spots in the NFC Championship game. This brings us back to September of 2018 when they made the decision to trade for Khalil Mack, as at the time this was a bold decision, and in some ways it has certainly paid off. Now, if you look at it from the perspective of winning championships, obviously it has not, but the teams that have won Super Bowls since this trade were quarterbacked by Tom Brady twice and Patrick Mahomes once. So it's not like a team made a fluke playoff run or anything like that. This trade at the time was worth it, and you really don't hear a lot of backlash from people about this trade because of what the Bears have done since it. 2 playoff appearances, and in reality they should have most definitely have won a playoff game, and as we know, the infamous double doink happened in 2018. But with a young quarterback in Mitch Trubisky looking to take the next step, this team needed a franchise cornerstone on the defensive side of the ball, and they certainly got one in Khalil. Unfortunately for the Bears, Mitch didn't work out, and a lot of their plans became derailed due to this. So here we are nearly 3 years after the Khalil Mack trade, and GM Ryan Pace is without a doubt on the hot seat. And a lot of the concerns about this roster are unfortunately still the same 3 years later. Can they have sustainable quarterback play is obviously a big question, like it was in 2018, and who will be the number 2 receiver is still a question, like it was in 2018. The last thing I want to mention about the Khalil Mack trade is the 2 players the Raiders drafted were running back Josh Jacobs and corner Damon Arnett with the Bears' first round picks, that was, and I love Josh Jacobs and thought Damon was a huge reach at 19 overall last year. So now I would ask you, the viewer, who really won that trade? Would you rather have Khalil Mack or Josh Jacobs and Damon Arnett? But the point is, the Bears had countless other draft picks to use and improve the team and improve the receiving core, and that has been a huge problem, seemingly since Alshon Jeffrey and Brandon Marshall left the team. This is all, of course, aside from Allen Robinson. But with GM Ryan Pace being on the hot seat, I do expect them to have a very aggressive draft, and it starts with the 20th pick in the first round. Now, having a GM that's on the hot seat presents a challenge for an upcoming draft, because the current general manager has to improve the roster, but also at the same time has to keep his job. Meaning, if there's a player, and we use this extremely loose here as an example, with all pro upside but a floor of an undrafted player, they wouldn't take him in the first round because he won't have an impact as a rookie, and that is what the Bears need: immediate impact. Because of that, and with their number 1 receiver Allen Robinson being under contract for only a year, given it is a franchise tag, I definitely expect them to take a receiver in either the first or the second round. Rashad Bateman is a receiver out of Minnesota who should be a first round pick, and he makes a lot of sense, and in some ways, his game even compares to Allen Robinson's. With 5 quarterbacks going in the top 10 to 12 picks, a few tackles going here and there, and a few defensive players as well, it would be surprising if Bateman isn't there when the Bears are on the clock later this month. And this is a team that has Andy Dalton at quarterback for the upcoming year, and this hasn't been said publicly, but if he does good, there is always a chance he will be there for 2022 and beyond. He has gotten a lot of criticism recently, and more so because the Bears fan base thought they were getting Russell Wilson than anything, but his tenure in Cincinnati was not all bad, please remember this. Yes, he eventually got replaced, but they did make several playoff appearances and were consistently good during his time there, and especially in the early years. If he can be that player for the Bears, then their potential and their ceiling is a lot higher than a lot of people would want to admit. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying they're going to compete for the NFC title and bid for a Super Bowl, but if Andy Dalton plays to his fullest potential, then the Bears will create noise and definitely be a problem for some teams. They were 8-8 last year with poor quarterback play, and from Andy, we can expect a little better than what they had last year, as combined Mitch and Nick threw for 26 touchdowns to 16 interceptions, and their number 2 receiver was Darnell Mooney. So pairing Andy Dalton with Rashad Bateman and Allen Robinson, of course, and this is already an improved offense from what they had in 2020. Now, looking ahead at the Bears' later picks in the draft, it is worth noting they do not have a 4th round pick. They do, however, have 4 6th round picks, and that will be ammunition for Ryan Pace to maneuver around the draft on day 3 as much as he pleases. Now, what I also want to note is because of Pace's personal future with the team being uncertain, if a prospect like Jalen Waddle, for example, who is regarded as a better prospect than Rashad Bateman, started to fall in the draft, you could definitely see the Bears give up pick 20 and a 2022 first to move up to get him if they love Waddle or whoever. Again, Waddle was just an example. Now, as we have discussed on the channel for a few months now, this is a very loaded receiver class, and the reality is in today's NFL, it is much easier to get good receiving talent than it is good cornerbacks, so we could definitely see Chicago go corner with their first pick and receiver in the 2nd or 3rd round. Remember, this is a team that has to be able to stop, or at least try and stop, Davante Adams, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and we assume someone like Jalen Waddle if he gets drafted by Detroit. Davante is as good as it gets. Justin Jefferson put up 1,400 yards at 21 years old, including 2 100-yard performances against Chicago, and in those games, Jefferson had a combined 16 catches for 239 yards. So if the Bears wanted to try and combat Jefferson or limit him for the next decade, as a lot of teams will have this problem, not necessarily just Chicago, they could go corner in round 1, and understandably so. Caleb Farley out of Virginia Tech recently had back surgery, and this is a tricky situation regarding his draft stock, because I can't sit here and say with any certainty that he will be a top 10 or 15 pick the way we once thought he was. And this obviously benefits Chicago, assuming Farley heals correctly and everything turns out alright if that is indeed the case. All I know at this point in time is teams are a little fearful of Farley, and his stock has certainly fallen a little bit within the past few weeks. Farley going up against Justin Jefferson for the next decade and Davante Adams until he calls it quits would be good for the Bears, and this would be a best case scenario. They get a borderline top 10 player to fall to them at 20 because of a pre-draft operation, and obviously we assume this if he turns out alright and turns out good as advertised. Again, we can't say for sure he will be there at 20, but we can say the likelihood he is there now versus a month ago is a night and day's difference. Now, one position the Bears will also address, and that will be in their top 2 or 3 priorities, is the offensive tackle position. Again, this is largely going to depend how the board plays out for them, but with it being as deep of a tackle class as it is, if somehow someway Christian Darrisaw from Virginia Tech falls to them, I think they would take him without hesitation, unless Caleb Farley or someone else currently unforeseen is also there. And this has to be noted, as I was recording this, Sam Darnold was traded to the Panthers, which means we may have one of the Big 5 quarterbacks fall and start to slip down the draft board. This goes back to one of the first points of discussion from this video, with GM Ryan Pace potentially being, I don't want to say reckless with his picks, but more carefree than a lot of other GMs around the NFL. For a lot of the new regimes, especially like the division rival Lions, for example, they have contracts for the next half decade, so there is no pressure to go get a guy right now, whether that's Kyle Pitts or whoever for them. But for the Bears, there is no tomorrow, and this is it. The Vikings have improved a lot this offseason, and the Packers are coming off of back-to-back NFC Championship game appearances, so the Bears definitely have their work cut out for them, to say the least. Now, I'm going to be as honest as I say this as I can. The Darnold trade happened a half hour ago or so. I don't think Chicago would trade up to go get a quarterback unless it is one they are absolutely 150% sure of, because more than likely Andy Dalton will be better than the 4th or 5th quarterback as a rookie, and Ryan Pace and the organization has been burned and made fun of for 4 years for trading up to draft Mitch over Mahomes. Granted, it was one pick for moving up from 3 to 2 with the 49ers, but they did draft Mitch over Mahomes. As we also said, the Bears have 4 6th round picks at this time, and there is no way they make all of those picks, especially without a 4th round pick right now. So especially on day 3, I expect them to be aggressive and to be wheeling and dealing to go get whoever they determine their guys are. As for the draft priority, I expect it to go wide receiver, corner, and offensive tackle in that order. QB would be a priority if they were selecting in the top 5 or top 8 of the draft, but I think we all acknowledge, or at least should acknowledge, that they won't get one of the top 4 or 5 quarterbacks in this draft class. Now, I do have a quick announcement here at the end, but I do want to say the Bears' 2021 season is not as doomed as some people make it out to be, with Andy Dalton being their quarterback. With how David Montgomery ended the season and what we assume will be a good defense this year, they're going to be a tough out in the playoffs if they have decent quarterback play, which I do think Andy can provide. Now, the announcement is not anything major. I just want to inform you guys I do have a TikTok where I make reactionary videos to breaking news, as I did that with the third overall pick trade with the 49ers and Dolphins, and then again today with Sam Darnold to the Panthers. If you want to follow me on there, the link will be in the description. But that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'm always open to video suggestions, so if you have anything, please comment below. Again, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It would mean the world. And as always, as we always close every video, love you guys. Deuces. Peace.